Today's chat is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/FFC. With over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player, this is a great alternative for keeping up with the monthly Focus Fire book club.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome back to the 21st installment of our Extra Lore series, recorded live on December 6, 2017, over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Big shout out to our live chat here. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Our topic for this chat is going to be an introductory look into Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. This is your host, Blue Crew 86. Alongside me, we have our resident Gunter extraordinaire, Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but do you have any thoughts on the topic tonight?
That collecting all of the lore stones for this one was not as painful as I thought it was going to be, thanks to one YouTube video. Whoever that was who collected all of them, thank you.
Is that the one that I sent you?
No, actually, that guy missed a few.
Oh, okay,
in the
okay.
Chat. So I found a different one with all 44.
Nice.
And this guy did an awesome job of editing it, and I wish I had his name off the top of my head, because I'm giving him a huge shout out, because it made transcribing everything so much easier.
Perfect. Yay, YouTube creators. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait, we have one of those. Don't we? Is he still with us? I think we have our crazed grizzle lore fiend over here, Beard Grizzly. Beard, do you have any thoughts on tonight's topic?
Yeah, because I need more to go ahead and remind me how many problems I have with my own brain. What? I think being called a shill too often is starting to get to me.
Is it starting to weigh down on you?
I think so. And by the way, I apologize for all my typing. I'm sitting here hitting my mute button on my Yeti, and apparently I think Windows really screwed up today, because these updates are bad. Anyway, I will try to mute myself here with Discord. But yes, I'm excited to hear some stuff. I'm gonna be honest right now. I didn't have a chance to do any preparation whatsoever. This month has been the weirdest month I think of my life. So yeah, good game. Good game.
Fair enough. Well, that being said, we always want to make sure someone who is well-versed in lore, so we just went ahead and tricked BelleBunny into joining us. Belle, I know you just played through it, so you actually are pretty fresh from playing through this game on stream, if I remember.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts of the game?
Oh, that's a really loaded question with a possibly long answer. Are you sure you want to ask me?
We have 2 hours, so
okay, so I can fill about an hour and 50 minutes with my answer, and then we can do 10 minutes of lore.
And then we can do shout outs afterwards.
Yeah, sounds good. No, honestly, I may have to label it as probably my all-time favorite game ever. And that's not just because it's a fun game to play and it's interesting and there's elements to it that are difficult, including the combat and the puzzle elements. But finally, somebody did justice to mental health issues in a game. Not saying that other games haven't done or haven't tackled it and handled it well, but I've never experienced a game that did it to this level and they didn't shy away. And when you learn about the amount of work that went into this game, the amount of research and involvement of people who deal with psychosis and other mental health issues, and the passion that was put into it is amazing. And playing it on stream was really cool, because having the response of other people watching it at the same time that I'm experiencing it, and not playing it alone,
right,
was probably better for my experience, so that I didn't just sit there crying afterwards. But I really, really hope that more companies can realize that they can tackle difficult issues, whether it's mental health or any other kind of social issues, and realize that they can still make bank doing so. And make really good points, and also still create a game that people could, honestly, you could probably pick up this game, play it all the way through. By the end, I'm sure you would realize that you've probably experienced something beyond just playing a kind of epic game, but you could just enjoy it if you wanted to. And I think that's cool, but still kind of get something more from it. And hopefully it makes you really think. And I think that that's a good mark of a really good game. Like I said, I could go on forever about this part of it, because to me, the mental health, I mean, those who know me, anything that tackles mental health is really important to me. And seeing a game that didn't romanticize it, and it also didn't do the stereotypical horror game, go into a mental asylum and everything's just death. And I mean, there is a lot of death and there's a lot of grotesque, but it's
very honest.
Yes, I love that. And to me, honestly, the biggest part was not romanticizing it. That's really important, I think, when it comes to mental health, because I think that's an issue today. Is the we either don't talk about it, or when we do, it's like this: oh, hey, I'm cute because I have this disorder, and that's not really what we want to do either.
All the sugarcoating,
right? But I don't know. Yeah, it was good. That's not really time with the lower aspects, but there's a lot of that too, and that was really cool.
Well, and I think you kind of hit, we'll run through the intro here real quick, but I do want to agree with you. I think, the cool thing about this game was actually the fact that the lore was there, and I'm not going to shy away from acknowledging that there is a lot of lore that was knotted in the game. But the bigger impact that this game, at least from what I've seen in the communities that I've been, a part of, the bigger impact is exactly what you're talking about, Belle, is actually, the whole fact that they took it head on and they pulled it off. I mean, like and obviously, as we will get into, with mental health situations, everyone has their own experience, and so some people disagreed with the way that the game presented certain things, and that's entirely fine. But they did try to keep it pretty general, and no, go for it.
I would just say the part that really impressed me is, for those who haven't played the game, if you do play the game, which I highly recommend, make sure that you also watch, there's like a Vidoc documentary that you should watch afterwards. It's literally included on the game itself. And it goes through their behind the scenes process of creating the game, both from like just the normal dev point, but also a lot of it's focused on the mental health and the research that went into it. And they actually had a number of people who have dealt with psychosis and also who work in the industry of mental health, helping people and studying it, come in and give their personal experiences, and a large variety of them, and tried to incorporate as many kind of broadened versions of their experiences into the game, and then had them sit down and watch a playthrough of it to get their response afterwards. And the positive response these people gave to it was really impressive to see. And the other really big impressive thing to me was let me know if I'm going too far into this, but the main actress, the fact that she was their video editor, I think, and was just a stand-in during like their run-throughs of the game, and basically ended up getting the part because they absolutely loved the way that she played the character, because she took from her own experiences with mental health and just gave it her all. And if you see some of the clips, like the side-by-sides of the actual in-game and then her doing the capturing, is just unbelievable. And it's like heart-wrenching and impressive at the same time, because you know that this person has gone through some crap in order to be able to portray this type of character. I think that was really important to have the right kind of person play this character, because I think that very easily would make or break this game.
Right.
So huge props to her too. And I totally am blanking on her name, and I apologize.
Melina Juergens, I believe. Is that who you're?
Yes.
Are you talking about the voice actress for Senua?
Well, voice actress slash face
actress,
model, everything.
Okay.
Everything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's run through the intro just real quick. Get that out of the way, and then I'm gonna just turn it over to Belle and Green. I think are gonna probably be the big sources of information on this one. So I'll turn that over to them as soon as we get through the show notes. So let's run through that real quick. Before we start off the chat, however, I do have a few housekeeping notes. In our last Extra Lore episode, we discussed the Marvel series. If you ever miss an episode and would like to catch up, please be sure to check out the new FocusFireChat.com for archives, articles, and links to the other aspects of FocusFire Chat. If you don't mind, please give us some feedback on iTunes to let us know how we're doing, as well as helping us continue to grow. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering where the intent is to offer a week-long in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. With the Extra Lore series, we delve into a game series other than Destiny for a full month, giving the group a chance to get a feel for the other games that our community loves to play. We try to stream a recap of this month-long conversation on the first Wednesday of each month. Please be sure to also give some support to the other podcasts in the Guardian Radio Network, links of which can be found in our show notes or on our website. These include podcasts focused on Destiny, Guardian Radio, the first and longest running Destiny podcast on the net, Guardian 1, a Destiny group dedicated to Guardians helping Guardians and discussing current Destiny news and happenings, Ghost and Echoes, a collection of the Destiny audio grimoire from Destiny 1, and the network's newest edition, The Guardian Life, a podcast from the casual Guardians perspective and highlighting all Guardians, large and small. We also have a non-Destiny focused podcast, The Enthusiast Life, which is a podcast that discusses a wide range of fun topics from within the entertainment world. Our next Extra Lore is going to be a discussion on the lore of Dead Space, so be sure to jump into the Discord server and weigh in on that. With that, where do you guys think is the best place to start when looking for a really basic understanding of Hellblade?
Well, I think starting with a general summary is kind of a good place to start. And so we talked about how important the game is from a personal perspective, but to dive into the personal perspective of the main character that Belle was talking about, Wiki describes it as inspired by Norse mythology and Celtic culture. Hellblade follows Senua, a picked warrior who must make her way to Helheim by defeating otherworldly entities and facing their challenges in order to rescue the soul of her dead lover from the goddess Hela. In parallel, the game acts as a metaphor for the character's struggle with psychosis, as Senua, who suffers from the condition but believes it to be a curse, is haunted by an entity known as the Darkness, voices in her head known as Furies, and memories from her past. Which, as far as like a super general summary, that's like one of the best ones I've read so far. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of people talking about it and summarizing it, but they don't really go into like a very glossed over type thing that's so neat like that. Yeah. So one of the things that I want to talk about is that intro to the game when you're in the canoe.
You mean the log? Sorry. That's
the log.
It's a canoe still.
Was it carved out?
Yeah.
Was it
not
carved
a ton,
out? Okay.
But just enough to be sitting in it, and not like.
I swear, I just remember it being like a log. Which I mean,
it's very log-like. There wasn't a whole lot of carving done, but it's canoe-ish. Very log-esque.
It was not. Canoe-ish. It was definitely one of those that needed the announcement: "Do not try this at home," at the bottom of the screen. Which this entire game really. Yeah. Anyways, continue.
Right.
I'm just gonna stop talking at that point.
Yep.
Can we just say that is one of the most terrifying yet moving entries into a game I've seen in a long time?
Yeah,
because of the voices.
Mm-hmm.
Which, for if we can just quick explain for those who haven't played it, from an audio standpoint, this game is like beyond incredible. Throughout the entire game, specifically at the beginning, you have the whole thing is recorded in a binary. Help me here.
Binary, yeah.
So like they actually show in behind the scenes. They have this special. It's called a 3DO mic, and basically it's actually got like ears on either side of it, and so like you only hear in one side or the other, whichever one you're closest to, and so you can kind of like walk around this thing, and so they actually have these voices whispering to you constantly throughout the game, and they like move in and out close and far away from you. You can hear them in one ear and not the other, or you'll hear two different types of things happening on either side of you, and it's all supposed to be like these literally like the voices in your head. And just throughout the whole thing, but specifically at the beginning, that it's so haunting. It's like your own, the way that we think on the daily, right? But just like magnified. So like, you know, like you're scared of something and your brain will be like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I should turn around. And then there's part of you that's like, no, you have to go on. You have to go on. Well, they literally are saying these things to you throughout the entire game, taunting you and also like convincing you can do these things. And it's just, the second, I mean, you can ask the people in chat. We're watching my stream and just instantly in the first, 30 seconds of the game, I'm like, I'm sold.
Mm-hmm. Point of order on that. Do not try to listen to the game without seeing the game. I try to do that at work.
Oh, no.
And
that's going to be so confusing and mess with you.
Yeah, I looked around a couple of times because some of the audio was just so dead on to like if somebody was behind me. And I wear stereo headphones at work when I'm working on stuff. And I was just freaked out part of the time. It's like, oh my God. No. Shout out to the voice actors who did the voices. Because she got a lot of variance in the different voices, because I think it's all just one actress, isn't it?
So there's the main one that you're hearing, that's kind of supposed to be like the main self, I guess, talking to you, right? But then there's multiple other ones. Like, did you watch the documentary?
I wasn't able to. No.
Okay, I would definitely go watch it. But they do show that there's actually even I believe a guy involved too. There's like 3 different women and a guy, and then there's the main woman, and they all kind of like layer over the stuff. But yeah, I mean, like the main woman does majority, like probably would say, I have no idea what percent, but a lot.
Mm-hmm. Of it. She gets a lot of depth, which is awesome as far as voice acting goes. So this canoe, you're hearing all these voices, and she is essentially trying to go to Helheim, right? During this section, she's trying to get into that land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the opening scene is when she lands on she gets to Helheim, or she gets to right outside, doesn't she? Because Helheim is the big dragon-looking thing, right?
I mean, Helheim is the final. That's where she's trying to make it to the entire time. You don't actually get there till.
Oh, I thought the entire end, thing was like walking through.
No, the whole thing. You have to cross the bridge. The bridge towards the end.
Okay.
Technically, when you're crossing over to Helheim, itself. Technically, I interpreted the beginning as that it's supposed to be almost like her land, her area, kind of merging with the concept of entering Helheim. It's kind of like the two bleeding together to me. That might be totally off.
I almost interpreted it as part of the merging of Drew's stories with her own world.
Okay.
So like the guy who tells her all the different lore and the stories that she's following, essentially.
Okay.
I mean, it's up for interpretation by all.
As far as like for those, as the whole time you're going down this like creek river thing on your log / canoe, you see all of these bodies on like there's some nasty bodies floating and hanging and stuck on sticks and all sorts of things. And I don't know if this is a great example of how you can kind of, the takeaway for everybody is going to be very different. I think that's intentional, but I kind of was taking it like at least the bodies and the people were supposed to represent what the Northmen had done to her people.
Right.
Since her village or whatever was obviously attacked by them. But that's why I said, like, I don't know if it's supposed to be that it's another space that also was attacked, or if it's just supposed to be like kind of her realities bleeding together.
I think that it's definitely It definitely could be a combination of it, because Drew's stories are all about the Northmen. All the lore stones are about the Northmen's like histories and the things that they talk about. Blue, you got something?
Well, I was going to say, you've mentioned Droost a couple times, or is it Droost or Druth?
Druth.
Okay, Druth. Do you want
he makes a joke about truth and Druth.
Oh, okay. Do you want to expand on Druth a little bit? Because it sounds like Druth is a pretty significant figure in the story.
Well, so there's Sinua, who's the girl you're basically playing through, and she is after the soul of her lover, Dillian. I always read it as Dylan. But she's going to go get his soul back, essentially.
And just a point, she has his head.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, has his head wrapped up.
Like, I mean, like, literally, it's a lollipop chainsaw style. Right? I mean, it kind of is, but it's not as cute. It's not as it's not as cute.
It's just what it is.
Right. But it's also kind of tiny.
You learn to feel that way about it throughout. Is like at first there's this like the voices as you're canoeing in are like, why is it breathing? Because you literally can see it like inhaling and exhaling. And so at first you're like, this thing is freaky. Like, why do we have this head? And then honestly, throughout the game, you can't help but kind of become connected to his head too. Like you start to just get kind of used to it and you kind of care about it in the same way that she does. Like, it's weird how the game makes you do that throughout it. Like, it makes you start to be okay sort of with the things that are happening.
It's such a touchstone for her. I mean, that's a lot of its purpose as far as like allowing her to focus and remembering the things that he taught her.
Right.
But as far as Druth, do you want to go on and say the thing, Blue?
Yeah, I was just going to say the other thing with the head is that a lot of those cultures viewed that as the seat of the soul. So if you were going to reclaim a soul, that is the most important aspect of the body, and it also could have been the only aspect of the body that was left. But I do want to just toss that in there too, is from a lore perspective, for this cultural influence, I think it's mostly Pict and Norse that I think, if I remember right, this is what's drawing from. But the head was often viewed. This was before the importance of was shifted to the heart in cultures. But back then, because the brain was located in the head, and that was where a lot of cultures believe that to be the center of the individual self, or the soul. So that's another thing.
So she needs to take that to hell, basically, to get.
That's
Dillian
what identifies him. That's right. Him. And so, because the other thing is like, you see this a lot with, like, especially with Greek mythology, there's not a lot of differentiation between the spiritual essences of things, but there is a differentiation in the individuals that have that spiritual essence. So if she goes and, says, I need, there's a Dillian, without showing who she, like, there's a communication gap between mortals and immortals as well. And so that is the identifier factor for him, for her to then demand for him to be returned. And also,
except that in her case, it is different. She's her own gap as well.
Right.
To basically explain, part of her what's considered darkness throughout the game is the fact that she can, I guess in some ways it's interpreted like she can see or communicate with or experience the other side in some ways,
yes.
But not in a good way necessarily to many people.
Is that the rot that she perceives to be growing?
Well,
it depends on how you interpret it, because some characters throughout the game interpret, so like her father interprets it as a very bad thing, that being able to see these things is horrible, it's bad, she's cursed, basically, it's this, but then people like her mother, who also kind of had the same experiences, saw it as almost like a power, a good thing. And other people, like even Dillian, doesn't necessarily encourage it the exact same way that her mother did, but says,
He's more open.
He
right,
accepts
you
her.
have
He
you
accepts her.
experience something, you have a power isn't the right word necessarily, but you have an ability, whether it's good or bad isn't his concern. It's more, she has this ability and it's something she needs to live with.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that? How do we allow you to live with it? And that's part of his big significance in her life, is nobody else was really like that.
So
for her.
we've mentioned the father and the mother just in passing. The mother is kind of who she, quote unquote, inherited the gift from. At least what it seems like the father seems to imply. And the father, was he some sort of priest type character?
I think I remember him being something like that. I can't
Like
remember.
shamanistic or...
I don't see it, and I hesitate because I don't know if it was a Celtic or a shamanistic, or if it was actually a Catholic. Do you guys? I don't remember off the top of my head.
I'm not sure. I mean, they don't give you a whole lot of information about Dad, other than a couple of cutscene moments. The biggest one being when you see what happened to her mom.
Wow.
Which was terrifying.
Oh my gosh. I don't know how much we want to talk about, but that is something that I can't, like, my entire life, that concept has absolutely terrified me. That was not a fun moment in the game for me. But I'm not sure. I don't know. I always got the feeling that he did hold some kind of, like, at least within her village, some kind of higher up position. But I don't know if it was religious related, if it was just like leadership position.
Right.
Or if those are even necessarily separate for her village. I have no idea.
Definitely had a sense of power of some sort,
Right.
whether
I do know
necessarily.
I do know that he was the religious leader of the village.
So,
because that was the point of contention between him and Dillian.
Besides the fact that the father keeps
besides the other massive problems that he has.
It's just okay. So I love, Belle, how you connected to the mental health aspect. I actually connected more with the familial restraining that happens in the game. For me, that's actually slightly personal, considering some of my past. So the fact that the father, you find out throughout the game that the father was holding her basically hostage in the house, not letting anybody see her because he thought she was sick or had this darkness in her. And you hear that throughout the game, like, you have this darkness. And that drove me a little nutty watching it, because it's just like, it's just, there's not a really good way to describe how it makes you feel. Like, ugh.
No, yeah, it's, I mean, to somebody, to anybody out there who hasn't necessarily experienced either the extreme mental health end of this, or any kind of either like restraint at home or abuse at home or anything, it's still, they do it well enough that if you've experienced it, it's going to hit the nail on the head for you, and you're going to connect with it in a certain way. And if you haven't necessarily experienced those, they still do it well enough that you're going to sit there and go, you can
recognize it.
Like, this is just no. And you start to understand throughout the entire game, whether it's the things with her dad, the things that she's seen, what happened to Dillian, all of these things. Like, you start to kind of go, okay, I can understand why she is the way she is. She's experiencing the things she's experiencing. Because anybody dealing with those things, even just separately, let alone all together, the average human, I have a personal belief that every single human has a breaking point. Just some people have it at a different point than others, and from different things, if that makes sense. And so you start to understand how somebody could be the way that she is and see the world the way she does. throughout playing the game. And do we really quick on it? I know we're trying to get on to other kids, but I feel like we've kind of skirted past what happened to Dillian.
I mean, the only thing is, like, don't we find out about that later, or do you find out about that right at the beginning? Because I can't remember where.
Well, we found out that he's dead.
Right. You know that.
I mean, are we going like linear? I guess I should question. Are we going linearly through the story, or are we just talking like general? If you guys haven't caught on, this is a really difficult game to explain. One, because the experience is different. Two, because it kind of jumps around a lot.
Right.
Well, the cutscene, the touch. What are they? Lore stones.
Lore stones.
I mean, they're kind of all over the place too, a bit.
Sort of. I mean, they do tie
they're
into
clumped, right? Aren't they?
They are.
Yeah, they're. As long as you're looking for them, you do find them in order, technically, or at least roughly in order, and they do connect with the current elements of the game, like the actual current day parts of the game. It's just when you have the jumps to cutscenes and stuff that are explaining how she got to the point she's at and everything. They're kind of all over the place as far as timeline goes, but
it's just like recollections. It almost feels like, as far as the cutscenes.
Well, I think the best way to do then would be obviously to kind of take a step back, and I'll just basically open it up to spoilers, because it kind of makes sense to me then to best understand for the situation for a main character that Senua is in. The past is more important than the present to a degree, because that's what led her to the decision to, or not even really, well, I mean, yeah, it is the decision, even if it is a subconscious decision, the decision to be where she is. So, I mean, I think my argument would be, let's talk about Dillian. And then I know you guys mentioned, is it Galena? Galena is her mother?
Is that right? I think that's right.
I think that's her name, or at least I know that's what it looks like as far as reading it.
Okay. So let's talk about Dillian real quick, and then talk about, I know you had mentioned earlier that something very traumatic had happened to her mother at the hands of her father, which adds to the trauma. So Dillian, what's going on with Dillian?
Well, basically, there's theories that I think will wait on, at least in my opinion, wait on why this happened to him in particular until we talk about a later part of the game. But as far as what happened to him, these Northmen came into the village, killed a lot of people, if not everybody. I have no idea how many, honestly, but Dillian was the one that mattered to our main character. And he was killed in what's basically known as like one of the, if not the most gruesome ways a person could be killed, fitting in that time period and lifestyle, I guess, and that's called a blood eagle. It's pretty nasty. It basically involves like almost kind of creating wings out your back via your rib
arteries,
cage split and stuff. So there is a point where you do see vaguely see him hung up like this, and this is how she finds him. So on top of already dealing with some mental health things separately, she's now seen the love of her life, who was helping her at least be slightly more stable, or at least be able to get out of her really bad episodes. Not only dead, but killed in a very, very not fun way. Not that there's really any fun way to be killed, but it's a very shocking, yes, and put on display as he was. And the reason that she found him like this, rather than that she was there when it happened, is because she had removed herself from the village, because she was trying to go, I'm trying to remember what it's called. There's actually a name for basically if somebody was feeling this darkness or dealing with something, they would go basically kind of remove themselves from society and go spend some time on their own to basically kind of re-find themselves and try to get rid of it and then come back. And I can't remember what it's called. But she was trying to do that mainly for the sake of Dillian. And then she comes back in Dillian's dead. So she feels not only has she triggered more things for herself, but also she, blames herself for his death and for not being there. But she thought she was doing the right thing by removing herself from society for a while. So it's kind of a catch-22 for her. Everything kind of just sucks at this point.
Mm-hmm. And then the thing that you find out about her mother a little bit later is that Belle kind of hinted at it a bit earlier, that her father actually basically burns her at the stake. Was it actually kind of a witch hunt scenario? I remember the cutscene just because it was so impactful, but at the same time, it's like you want to block that out a little bit.
Right. That's definitely the way that it reads, is that it was basically, labeling her as either, I don't know if it was necessarily as a witch, but as their equivalent of, she has this darkness, she's evil, she's bad, it's going to spread, we need to stop it. Mm-hmm. But Senua's entire life, basically, she has remembered it as that her mother took her own life, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. And you don't realize it.
Right. So there's kind of a big difference, too.
Yeah.
Dad killed my mom. Mom decided to take her own life. Neither one's good, but, a big missing piece in your...
Well, but that's also congruent with actual reality, too, is when you're faced with some unspeakable trauma, your brain will separate reality from a fantasy and bury it. Amnesia is the best defense that a brain has to severely traumatic experiences such as your father burning your mother at a stake. That definitely qualifies as a traumatic event.
Right. Yeah. In which you don't learn about that until almost the very, very end. You don't learn the truth about what your father did until the very, very end of the game, essentially. The other thing is that, does she have terrible feelings towards her father at the beginning?
It almost doesn't feel like it, because the first few times that you hear his voice, which you don't even realize is her dad, at least I didn't at first. You just hear this really deep. Can we just talk about? He has one freaking epic voice. Okay.
He totally does.
You hear this deeper voice, and at first it's not necessarily encouraging, but it's not completely trying to take her off the right path, I guess is the best way I could explain it. So at first, your first impression of this voice isn't that it's necessarily straight up bad. But I do think that as time goes through the game, her realization of her hatred towards her father, and I don't know if it's just that she buried that as well.
Well, that would make sense. It would make sense that you would bury, because you're not supposed to hate your parents, right?
Right.
It's not acceptable to hate your parents.
Well, and if you're forgetting one of the main reasons that you...
Right. But that's the thing, is the disconnect between what you're expected socially to do and then what you actually feel is a very large traumatic event in and of itself, just in general. Not even taking aside or taking out the literal deaths that were happening here, that disconnect in and of itself, that dissonance causes trauma in general everywhere. That's why you have the quote unquote stereotypical moody teenagers, is because they're trying, that's a standard attempt to create a harmony with that dissonance, because they're exploring, you are exploring your own personal emotions and your responses to the world compared to what you're being told is you're supposed to be your response. That's where the rebellious age and all that's where that comes in, is that's that figuring out of who am I? What am I supposed to do? Right. What am I allowed to do?
Having all of this.
And then add on top of that, you actually have a legit reason. It's not her dad took away her cell phone. Her dad is actually kind of I don't want to say anything necessarily bad. Face. Yeah, let's go with that one. He actually did severely bad things. And these feelings are legitimate, but there's still that dissonance because the education and the society that she's in it's respect your elders, right? You do what your elders tell you, you know, all that. So I would not be surprised if she doesn't even know she hates her father until, you know, until later.
Well, and when that's the one person you have left in your life,
right?
At this point, like, you're not going to choose to hate the only like family or loved one you have left necessarily, unless you have to, you know, because she's kind of lost everybody else. I never really had anybody besides her mom and Dillian as positive things. So
I kind of wonder, just you're talking about his epic voice, which that voice isn't the same voice actor for the father, the voice of the Darkness Shadow character that shows up periodically throughout the game.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Is I think as it goes on, you connect that they're, at least to me, I connect like they were one and the same. Eventually, they melded into one character.
I did too,
and I also love that constantly the shadowy version of him always speaks in rhyme, basically, which makes it so much more haunting too. And like starts off as almost being like almost like a good version of a like conscience almost. And then slowly you realize that it's just in control of her, trying to control her, trying to, again, like her father was doing, hold her back from what she believes and what she thinks is best for herself. And that she has to overpower that eventually.
So that's kind of her backstory. We mentioned the Furies at the beginning. There's one other character that is in her past before she goes on this trip that you learn about throughout this campaign or the story is Druth, which we mentioned him at the beginning. And he's more of he's not an essential character to her history, except for he tells her the stories.
Right.
He's the one who tells her about the Northmen stories, and he was captured by the Northmen originally, we find out. And we find out at the end, possibly, some other things about him, unfortunately. But his character, he comes in and out throughout the game. Not super important to her backstory, but important to the game at kind of overall towards the end.
Right. My question, and this is something that I've been still trying to figure out, is was she supposed to have met him while she was on her little, I really wish I could remember what it's called, but her
like sabbatical type thing?
Society. Yeah. Was that supposed to be when she met him, was when she's out in the woods or whatever? She finds him injured out there. That entire like conversation between them, like her getting to know him, her helping him out. Was that supposed to be while she was gone? Because like there's no like context of him ever being involved in the village.
And the only thing we know is that he escaped the Northmen. We don't know where she meets him necessarily. There is the cutscene at the end, that extra cutscene, that it looks like he's in Firelight, which would kind of imply that he is out in the wilderness with her. But I mean, it's a fairly electricity society anyway, so Firelight doesn't necessarily be indicative that it is. Oh, that is not a cool theory, Blue, that you just put in chat.
Oh yeah, no, okay. So basically, overall, Druth is a character that, at least according to the story you hear during the game, he was captured by the Northmen. He basically, one of the things that Northmen do is, and Blue or Green, this is one of those ones where you guys are going to have to pop in with names. There's this like fire god. I don't remember the name of the fiery god.
Valvrin?
Yeah.
Valvreven?
Valraven's the first one.
The Suitor.
That's like the raveny head one. I'm talking the one that's got like the
Suitor.
Yeah, that's Suitor.
Yeah, sure. That person. Thing. God.
Which actually is in Norse mythology too.
Yes.
Like both of them are technically in Norse mythology, but Suitor is the more important one.
But one of the things that they do in order to, I guess, like call upon him. I don't know if it's to call upon. I don't remember what it is. Basically, to trigger something with him, they would actually take these and I don't know if this part is like actual like truth or not. This is just in the game. You guys will have to correct me about I rely on you guys to know the actual like lore stuff here. That's not what I'm here for. But that they would take people, usually basically slaves of theirs, and tie them up and set them on fire to like sacrifice them to this god. And that Druth was supposedly one of the people who was supposed to be getting burned. I believe from our understanding, he did get somewhat burned and ended up getting away. So when she meets him, he's very badly hurt. And she kind of helps nurse him back to health-ish, ? And he kind of shares stories with her. They become kind of really strange companions. And he makes a vow to her that he will always basically help her out in this life and in the next, which is kind of important because the entire time she's taking her trip to hell, he's telling her these like Norse stories that go in line with what she's experiencing. And the question that I always have with this is are his stories happening to line up with what she's experiencing, or is she experiencing them because of the stories he's told her? Like, is she creating this experience as she goes through it based on the stories that he's told her, and that's why they're kind of in her head, that's why she's experiencing it the way she is? Or is she just like kind of, are they actually two separate like experiences? I know it's kind of I don't know if that question made sense, but
I don't think
like
they're
a
two
chicken
separate.
and
I don't think they're two separate experiences.
I think it's a chicken and the egg type thing too.
I mean, I'll just break game wall there because it's a video game, so anything that happens in the video game is it's going to be connected. Like there's a reason why. So, right. Other than that obvious cheap answer, I do like what you said there is that she's creating this scenario based on what he was telling her. Because the other thing that I kept thinking too when I was watching is like, who's to say that this is actually, I mean, the first obvious question is, who's to say this is actually happening?
Right, which is what a lot of reviewers have talked about. Like, is this a
Wait, there's a
creation of her
question
own
about
mind?
that? Because I thought, I mean, maybe, I'm not trying to like.
I mean, rhetorically, it's like, but it's not even so much as it's not so much as is this really happening? No, I'm actually kind of narrowing in on. Think about Druth as a counselor. Could this be him helping her through a situation that she is still in the forest going through an episode? Or
and this is her walk through
This is her walk through.
Oh, dude, you just like inceptioned this beyond where I was thinking.
But that's the thing is like from a counseling perspective, this is exactly what a good counselor would do, is they would role play it. And this is literally her taking her problems head on, and going to battle with this ethereal darkness that is within her, and challenging that darkness and challenging the problems that she's having and all that. And it's basically phenomenological psychology is what this is.
Right. I think I'm like, it's weird because like half of me is stuck on the way I played it, but none of it is necessarily happening. Like, obviously, my opinion, she's not actually going like to meet Hela. She's not actually like taking his head anywhere, because the game kind of shows you that that's the case
right
at the end. But you taking it to that whole other level, Blue, of that maybe, like, my question is Dillian even dead necessarily then? Is him being dead her creation of what her darkness would do to him? Or
is that and I don't mean to present Druth as a good character necessarily, but could it be that Druth right well, and yeah anyways, but I mean, could it be that it was a challenge to her of like, why are you leaning on this man? Why are you leaning on this other person? You have the strength within you to do this. And that's kind of the ending too, if I remember. It's kind of like she kind of ultimately comes to a degree of acceptance of everything that's going on, and she stands herself. She stands for herself. She doesn't need Dillian. She doesn't need her father. She doesn't need her mother. She doesn't need the Furies. She doesn't need she doesn't need all these other things. She doesn't need the sword, the really important sword that she gets.
Grimmer.
Yeah, it wasn't that with Odin's challenges. Like,
you took this in a way more positive light for the ending. This is really interesting to me.
But that's actually how I interpreted it too. Is like she's actually gained all these skills and is able to stand up for herself at the end.
But that's the thing is like that is a healthy counseling session, is what that is. That is you are challenging your demons, and it's not pretty. I mean, that's what I loved about the cutscenes. That, granted, I don't have a PlayStation, so I haven't actually played the game. But from what I've seen all the cutscenes, and I've seen most of the, of the stuff that I have seen. It reminds me a lot of what a lot of counselors will encourage people who have severe trauma. I mean, you don't shy away from the dirty aspects of these traumas, because to shy away from it is to let it win. You sweep it under the rug, it's just going to come back. I mean, that's basic subconscious psychology, is like you put it in your subconscious, guess what? It's still there. You're still thinking about it. You just aren't aware of it.
Well, it's even just the way if somebody has a phobia, for example,
yes.
I know it's going a slightly different route, but like my mom's I grew up with a mom therapist my entire life, so I got the up close and personal experience with how all that stuff goes. But if you have somebody that has a phobia, like for example, if somebody's got like agoraphobia, which would be like the fear of like public spaces and people and stuff, one of the things that you would do is go through a process of very kindly forcing is not necessarily the right word, but like kind of like a number of small goals that build up. So even just something as simple as opening your window that day. And then the next day, maybe like opening your door and standing
it's
inside still, but opening the door and then close the door. And the next day, like maybe you take one step outside, and eventually you get to the point where you're walking, down your sidewalk. And hopefully someday that leads to going to the market or something, like it's a process, and it is the facing the fear head on. Just in this case, if that's the case, dang, they went in deep.
Well, and I think the other thing too is I kind of take the brutality of the game. I kind of took that as like, she is genuinely not in the modern era. Like this is not a
right
housewife who has problems, and this is not that. This is someone who is legitimately in this type of scenario, whatever. And so the level of brutality and the level of
mysticism.
Yeah, the mysticism. I was going more for like the grittiness and stuff like that. But yeah, the mysticism and the cultural, like the supernatural religious aspect of it. That makes sense within the historical context of what we're seeing with her.
Right.
But I'm actually begging the question too, is because this is also making the case that mental illness and mental health and mental issues have always been there. They've always been there. This is nothing new, and I think that's,
we talk about them all the time like they are. It's like they crept up. 10 years or something.
Yeah.
Like,
little did we know that until the Gulf War, PTSD didn't exist. No.
Well, okay. Yeah. I mean, the problem is, and you guys, yes, mental illness has been there forever, but mental health studies have not been, and so we have not had words for a lot of these things. That's PTSD and bipolar disorders and stuff. Right. I mean, we've never had words for this. So a lot of the psychology was not developed until the 1900s. And a lot of the stuff which is showing, it was labeled as madness or darkness or anything like that, which is what this game is. It's showing you the perspective of what may have theoretically happened as far as being labeled that way back then.
Right.
And I think
that's a very good point.
And I like that point. And I think I like the point, because I think the other thing that shows is that even though we didn't have words for it, and Green, correct me here if I'm misunderstanding that, even if we didn't have the semantics to describe what was going on, the resolution was still kind of the same. Like, the resolution to dealing with some of these problems is still pretty similar to the resolutions that we have that are successful today.
Well, I mean, if they actually address them at all.
Right.
For
well,
many years, they were just locked up in insane asylums because they didn't know what to do with them.
Right. Well, we have a local. We literally have an area here, Asylum Point. It's actually like a nature preserve area now, but it's also on the same road that the Winnebago Mental Health building, hospital, facility, whatever term we want to use, is on. But it used to be called an asylum. And it was one of the main ones in this entire area. And it is where literally in the past, they literally did anything. Even people who had non-mental health, what we would consider today mental health issues, but then now we would consider more like a physical ailment, but that may come across as having some mental effects as well, would just be like literally just thrown in there, and they had no idea what to do with them. There wasn't the studying done in the way, and when there was studying done, it was a very not good version of studying people. And how it's kind of scary how recent some of, like, when I was looking at the history of this place, how recent some of it.
Right. I mean, from an educational psychology, a lot of students who maybe Down syndrome or autism were not allowed in classrooms. And there's still areas that they're still not allowed in classrooms. They have their own special classrooms. There's not inclusion anymore. But mental health developments are still fairly new. But mental health ailments, I guess.
Yes. I like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Have been around forever.
It's not like our brains have changed that drastically just because we're dealing with current day issues.
Right.
Realistically, like you were talking about, Blue, the time period and stuff, it being more gritty, right? It is a good example of it. It kind of represents the idea of, we not in any way saying that what somebody may deal with today is necessarily any less than what somebody may have dealt with in her world, in her time period. But that, there wasn't the availability at all to go seek help. You were literally like basically shunned from your village or burned at a stake, or, go remove yourself and figure it out. And if you come back still
hierarchy.
Broken, well,
Maslow's hierarchy was a little bit skewed in their case.
And one thing I did want to hit on with the darkness that we keep mentioning, and one time, Blue, you called it the rot, and that is what they call it throughout the game. One of the cool ways that they represent this throughout the game, other than just hearing the voices in your head and seeing kind of the grotesque things that you see and stuff, is also that pretty early on in the game, pretty much your first encounter with anything, like any enemies at all, you basically see yourself die. And at first you think that your character literally just died. You're like, oh, what now? Did I just lose
Dark Souls? What
happened? It throws you off, and then all of a sudden it cuts to showing another version of yourself walking up and seeing yourself dead, and you're like, okay. And you end up being told basically that you're seeing what is to come. And throughout it, starting from that moment on, Senua's hand has I guess, for lack of better terminology, it looks very burnt and crispy, I guess, but also kind of veiny and grotesque. Look up a picture; it's really well done. But
it is.
Basically, every time that you fail an encounter, or you die in the game, the rot, as it's called, grows up your arm. And you're told that if it grows all the way up to your head, your character dies. And the way the game portrays it at the beginning is that it's a permadeath, that you lose your progress, that her story starts back over. And this is where I paused the game for a good 10 minutes. It was like, chat, does anybody know if this is true? Because just for my own sanity, I don't know if I can handle a game that's going to do that. And as far as I know, it doesn't actually reset you. And the theory I came up with for why is that basically the concept is as long as you're making progress, right? And because the way the game is built, you're always technically making progress. It's resetting you back to the last save point. If you were to actually fail, then your character would like permanently die. But because throughout the game you are technically making progress up to the point you get stuck at, you're never actually permadying. I know it's kind of a weird explanation. I explained it to myself better right after I played it, but it's a very good representation of the I guess the mental issues that she's dealing with, literally being this like visual tangible thing throughout the game, because you know a lot of times mental health is a invisible illness. It's not something that you're necessarily seeing, and even if you see somebody crying, that's not representing what's actually going on inside of them. There is no adequate way to even put into words what somebody is dealing with. I mean, this, like I said, this game is one of the closest I've ever seen to coming to showing this this extent of mental health. And so having this rot be this like visual representation of it, I think is really cool, and it helps, especially if you're not somebody who deals with it to any kind of even remotely close level to what the main character does. It really helps you understand how every single bad experience, even if it's small, can rot away at your well-being.
It just shows how fragile she is. Like everything that would be perceived as a defeat can lead to instability.
Yes. Definitely. And I don't know, it just talking about it makes me want to play.
Yeah, it's definitely. It's a fun one. It reminds me, does it play like God of War? I know that's like a side tangent, but the way like watching it, I have a PlayStation.
I've never played God of War. I've been kind of told not to by people who. Well, hold on. You guys have to understand that I made a really. I stepped very far out of my comfort zone to play Hellblade because I don't do grotesque very well. I don't do horror. It's not the stereotypical horror game. It's not like jump scare, but it is very creepy. There are definitely some nasty things in the game. It deals with some really intense stuff, both like visually and just mentally. So it was. I don't play games generally like that. And I made the exception because I walked in not knowing a whole lot about the game. I had heard that made me go, okay, I need to experience this because I knew that I was going to connect a little too well to elements of her experience.
Right.
Which was also a concern for me. I was really worried that it was going to be a bad thing for me to do. But I think in the end was therapeutic, honestly. But anyway, that was kind of I can't really, I don't know as far as God of War goes.
And that's okay. It's
Sorry.
just watching it because of the puzzle type. I mean, there's physical battles that you have in the game, but there's also these puzzle type challenges you have to,
which I would argue are the bigger element of the entire game.
And that's
the combat realistically, just from a dev point, is not the. I love you, Ninja Theory, but the combat's not the best built that it could be. It has some weird moments, some quirky things that happen that shouldn't, that are frustrating.
Just dodge a lot.
But the problem is sometimes dodge just doesn't dodge. You doesn't always respond properly. Like there's, just talking about it from that standpoint, which is why I immediately after I recognized that that is not the main element to this game, and that it's okay if it frustrates me, I'll get through it eventually. I was like, oh, okay, the puzzles, the experience is more of what this is about, and there's some combat,
which again is a message in and of itself.
Right. But yeah, the puzzles are incredible, and I wish us the best of luck on explaining them to people.
Well, okay.
Memorize all your runes.
No, well, yeah, kind of. But like you have to line up like your vision with certain
Basically,
things.
yeah, you see these images, you see their letters. I'm assuming they're
Runes.
Lettering. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You see these normally on doorways. So they're basically you have to use these to open the doors. And what it is when it comes to psychosis, which I don't know if we hit on well, but the main mental topic tackled in this game is particularly psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the common experiences of people who deal with it is seeing like symbols or seeing meaningful things in the world that aren't necessarily there. A lot of times it'll be like in a shape and they'll be like, oh, that looks like this letter. This must mean something. And some people get so obsessed with like decoding what it is that they lose themselves in it completely. And so throughout it, you see these images on doors and you basically, it kind of is like ingrained in your mind's eye, I guess if you want to say it, like visually, that's how you see it in the game is it's kind of like this, you see a silhouette of it, I guess, and you walk around and you try to actually find this exact same image in the world around you and you focus on it. And when you do that, now you've collected it, you can walk back over the door and you've opened the door. That's just one of the examples of the and I love the way that it just feels like a game mechanic when you're first playing it. And then if you either know about psychosis or once you learn more about it after watching the video at the end, you're like, oh my goodness, they represented this really well as far as like
they did an amazing
it's beyond
job
game
with
mechanic.
They did an amazing job with that function. I love it because it's all about your perception of reality, which is
and there's multiple different. So there's seeing the symbols. There's these like big masks, I guess is the best way to put it, that you'll find in different areas. And when you look through them, the way that you see the world around you is different. So like, for example, there's like a rainy, dark version of the world, and there's like a bright, slightly more colorful, sunny version of the world. And in the two different worlds, things are different. So like in the sunny version, you might have a gate that's locked and you can't get through it. But in the rainy version, because everything's kind of been destroyed, you can now get through that area. And so you kind of have to switch between the two perspectives of the world to make it through a puzzle. And one of my other ones that I love is, so you'll come across like a staircase that's missing a huge section of it.
Oh, these are
the
cool.
Right angle.
This is my favorite.
Yeah, if you stand at the right angle, it like these little shards that are kind of just floating in your vision, I guess, line up, and when you focus on it, it recreates the staircase, and now it's a solid staircase, and you can walk up it. So it's kind of like this. It is kind of giving that element of being in like a very strange version of control of the world around her because of the way she perceives it.
Right. It gives you like, okay, so the shattered one, I always kind of viewed it as a shattered perspective that people experience. And the other thing was with the mask, like you step in and everybody does this. You put on a mask to cope with the world.
Yep. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, there's all the puzzles are tied into mental health and psychology on top of the whole psychosis thing. And even the bosses are tied into the psychology because you have the boss of Valvrin, who is the first boss you meet, and he's the master of illusions. And she has to figure out how to refocus her mind again with that. Yeah. And then you have Suter, who is the fire boss type thing, and you have to learn how to deal with pain and how to overcome it.
Yep.
I mean, it's all tying back in. It's such a well done game.
And this is Green and Belle. This is why I see this as a giant form of counseling, is because exactly what you just said, Green. It's teaching you how to shift the way that you perceive the world. And for someone with psychosis, that is a very important ability. Because psychosis is marked by a break from reality. And that's not to say that what they perceive is not real. What they perceive is real, but it's not an abstract form of reality. And so, like, their perception of, like, the god of fire, for example, pain, for her, that's a very important lesson to learn, because that's the acceptance of that pain that she's been carrying with her. And that's something, again, that I kind of see as when at the end, when she walks away from the fight and she's standing by herself, because she's also realized, the whole ending, when the final revelation of who everyone actually is kind of comes in. That's part of that revelation is, and at least from what I took it as, that was part of the worst demon in yourself is yourself.
Well, and not to jump over the bosses that we were talking about here, but in connection with what you were just saying, Blue, is the challenges that you face later on. The Odin's challenges.
Odin's
right?
challenges, yeah.
I would say almost represent that even more directly than these first two bosses do, because these first two bosses are your initial trying to get into the first door. Even like you have to literally beat two bosses, go through all these other things, deal with the illusions, refocusing yourself, dealing with the pain, running away from fire, all this stuff before you even ever get in the first dang door. Okay, and then there's a point where basically you lose your initial sword, and you have to go seek out a different sword that you find out is one that can kill a god, to my understanding. Is that right?
Yes, it's from the mythology. It's actually a Norse sword that was gifted from Odin to somebody else, gifted to Sigmund, I think, or Herbert.
Yeah, that sounds right. I think it was Sigmund.
It was Sigmund's sword. It was gifted to him, and then there's other things that happen in that lore, but it's an actual Norse mythology thing.
Which is super awesome, because this is the point where I started to finally... I'm sure I could have connected it earlier than this, but this is the point where I started to fully understand that all of the... Throughout it, you find these little, like, symbols on little stones or whatever, and you focus on them, and that's when Druth cuts in and tells you little snippets of, like, actual lore stories. And this is the first point where I went, oh my goodness, like these completely match up with what you're doing. Because he starts to tell you these stories of what's fitting with what you're literally trying to do with getting this sword. Well, the problem is the sword's not whole. You have to find the different shards and put it together and blah, blah, blah. And the part that I love is that this is the first point where you really get to go back and you learn about Dillion, how they met, why he's so significant to her. And that Dillion represented this person who saw the world for all of its beauty, and he had a lot of strength in her eyes, and that he also saw strength in her that she wasn't used to seeing in herself or having other people see in her. And that this is the only moment in the entire game, basically, you get to see a really pretty world for like 1 minute during a little cutscene thing. I love that the idea of comparing that Odin gifted this sword to somebody is very similar to throughout her trying to find the shards to the sword and even been directed to know about the sword. It's Dillion that's taking her there. So it's like Dillion is like Odin gifting this sword to her for her quest. And basically you go through these different challenges that are so directly experiencing different elements of, and I'm not even going to say psychosis at this point. This goes, at least in my opinion, even broader than
I would agree.
Psychosis. And it's dealing with what I generally call, at least an element of it, one of these particular challenges was dealing with what I call getting floaty. So I'm going to get personal for a second, if that's okay with you guys.
Go for it.
As somebody who deals with what is called, mine's basically a combination of what some people call depersonalization disorder and other people would call it dissociative disorder. And basically it's this concept of you kind of separate from reality, not necessarily to the point that somebody who's dealing with psychosis does. You're not necessarily completely living outside of reality. Majority of the time, you're not necessarily seeing things that aren't there, but you're not fully experiencing the actual world. The way I always put it is like the world to me becomes not tangible anymore. I know it's there, but I'm not fully experiencing. I have like tunnel vision. I don't feel things the same way. Everything is hyper focused on the emotional experience that I'm having. And it's kind of like a protective state that your body sort of goes into. It's like, I can't deal with the actual world around me because there's so much going on in my head right now. That is all I can even remotely think about trying to focus on. And one of the challenges that you go through is where you basically can't see it all. The game gives you a little bit of vision because of, completely walking in pitch black wouldn't work very well for a game.
Mm-hmm.
But everything is very, it's you can't see beyond a few feet in front of you. And what you can see is very
skewed.
It's almost like echolocation style, I guess. And you're freaked out. You're like, what the heck do I do? And the whole time Dillian is in your ear talking you through it, saying like, well, what can you hear? What can you feel? And so you're using your other senses other than sight to kind of make your way through this challenge. And there's these kind of monstrous things that you have to try to avoid along the way. And there's dead bodies and there's all sorts of things. And it's this, literally feeling your way through. And when you get out of this particular experience, I think this is the right one, where it goes to a cutscene of Dillian saying, wow, you did it, you're back. And you realize that it's comparing to a time when she had an episode where she was just completely not coherent to the outside world anymore. She was in her own darkness, her own version of the world. And that he actually was literally talking her kind of through getting out of this episode. And that was the first time she'd ever had somebody do that. And she gives him all the credit. Like in the cutscene, she's like, you did this, you helped me through. And he goes, well, no, you just needed a little bit of hope. You needed a little bit of like basically somebody telling you can do it. That was all you though. And that was super important that somebody gave her the credit and the power for what she did for herself. And that was the one where this particular challenge was really, really hard for me because I literally have dealt with exactly this before myself. And I literally have almost never seen a representation as good as what they did here. That was, at least from my personal experience with it, that was so nail. Like it was so well done. And even talking about right now is like, it puts me back to that feeling a little bit, which is good. Hard, but good. And that was just one example of one of the challenges where it goes like, this is the point where up until now you could have been like, okay, I'm playing kind of a really eerie Norse themed game. There's some bad stuff going on. She's dealing with some stuff. But at this point you're like, okay, I am playing a game where I am dealing with mental health. Like they're just like, at this point, if you haven't figured it out, we're going to make it very clear to you. And I think that's cool.
I mean, and it's not just, I mean, the aspect that you tied onto was like the blindness test, essentially, a lot more. I locked onto the labyrinth. It's just the feeling of being utterly lost. And it's something that everyone can, like, everybody ties into.
You have to light the fires. Yeah. Yeah.
And then just, there's some sort of fear, like all four of them, you're dealing with some sort of fear. And it's just, everybody can lock into it in some way, shape, or form.
When you complete them, this is the first point in the game where I feel like her in a good way. For the first time in the game where I completed this. I got through that. And I don't think it's just because I connected with it, like, as deeply as I did, but also just going, I overcame something that is really hard for some people to overcome, and that everybody can connect at least to some part of. Like, we understand some element of that struggle, and you did it, I mean, it may seem silly to some people. It's like, oh, it's in a game, but it represents a whole lot more if you let it.
I will say that this act, just to break the fourth wall a tiny bit, this is a point where we felt like we accomplished something. And yes, Senua does too. But like you were saying, she attributes everything to Dillian.
Right.
And so she's still trapped in the thinking of, I need somebody to help me. I'm helpless. I need somebody to help me out of this.
That's very true. It's, and the way they represent that in the game is cool because the whole time throughout each of these challenges, you're following this like very ethereal light version of Dillian's like silhouette, basically. So it's literally giving him like almost angelic kind of figure is the way it looks. And that he's kind of leading you through. And the voices in your head the entire time are like, that's not really him. You don't need him. Don't worry. Well, and then the other half are like, go to him. You need him. Like it's literally, it's so, the number of things that pile on to the experience. It's so good. I love, as somebody who doesn't normally get into the real lore, I guess I should call it. I thought it was so cool tying in the actual like mythology as you're experiencing each of these too. Like every time you walk up to a challenge, Druth cuts in and kind of tells you
about the
like,
people,
right? Like the mythology version of what to kind of go do, sort of, but it's all pieced together. Like it's all one story that you're experiencing. He's giving you shards of it as you collect shards of the. And I love the number of like layers of what they're teaching you as you go and what you're experiencing.
What's brilliant about like the lore stones or the shards that you're collecting is there's a few brilliant things that they did with it. One, the mechanics of it in general, delivering tiny stories that you could take by themselves, each individually, and still get something from it, but they're all tied together also. Then you have like the whole thing's in a circle with all the symbols, the runes. Each dot in between the groupings of them is one set of a story as well.
Right.
So there's 10 separate stories that Druth is telling you, but you're getting like 4, 5, 6 between each one of them. And each of the stories ties so closely into what she's doing in game. Like you have the stories of the frost giants that you learn about Sutur, which is actually the fire giant that's supposed to cause Ragnarok at the end. You learn about Odin and Grammer and Hela herself, the kind of main quote-unquote bad guy that you're going after. And the lore tabs are really well done to help guide you through so the lore is not the point of the game. The lore is the vehicle of the game.
Right. And it does a good job also of tying into keeping you in the right, I guess, like time period and world that she's living in as well. It's kind of like a good reminder of like, these are stories that aren't necessarily just stories to some of these people. Like these are explanations of why things are the way they are this time too. And, and then especially to her, if we're going with the idea that none of this is actually happening the way she's experiencing it, these stories are representing her version of her experience, right? They're helping build what she's going through, which in a sense, like it may sound like it's a person losing themselves to something not good, but I would argue to say that it's giving her a representation that helps her at least have the potential to try to tackle what she's dealing with by putting it into story form for herself, right? Sometimes it's easier to, as long as you're able to make that connection to reality again, sometimes it's easier to give a representation to yourself or an analogy, like the way we talk all the time. When we try to explain something difficult to each other, what do?
We talk in story.
Right. And so, or we pick a story from that person's life that we know they'll understand, and we try to put it into perspective of what we're experiencing. And that's kind of what she's doing for herself throughout it. So you could argue that it's at least a step in a possibly healthy direction, even though the way she's
it's a vehicle. It's a coping mechanism. It's speaking in a language that she can understand, figurative language that allows her to adjust. Eventually see how to adjust through it. Blue, I know you have something.
Well, I was actually going to say, actually exactly what you guys are saying. From a historical and literal or not literary context, that's the entire point of mythology. And Grimm's fairy tales, for example, is a very, very good example of this. You see in a lot of younger fairy tales and mythology and mythos in general, this very, very severe separation between the dark and the light, the good and the evil. And that's because psychologically speaking, in a development cycle, children aren't really able to understand grays. They really, that doesn't really happen until later in life, which is why Grimm's fairy tales are so gruesome, to be blunt, is because it's a lesson. That's the point. That's what stories are meant for. That's what stories have always been meant for. And so, but I think that's also, Belle, I think you kind of hit what I was actually going to say, is that this is the historical context in which she exists. So of course, if this is a representation of something that's not actually happening, that it is a mental exercise, let's just call it that, then this of course would be the flavor of that mental exercise, because these are the stories that she knows. And that goes back to Druth as being the storyteller. This is how you guide a person who is dealing with problems. You tell them a story. I mean, that's what you guys were just saying. You tell them a story. You help them understand the problem that they're facing via the safer vehicle of the depersonalization of a story, because then it's not happening to them, right? It's just happening to a character in a story. But the lesson that's learned, the lesson that is gained, is still there. And then that's, again, I keep going back to my kind of view of how this game ends, is that's where that ending kind of comes from, is because, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how far down the spoiler hole we want to go.
If we're going to talk about the ending, I think
we've pretty much already. I mean, we.
Okay. That fair enough. I mean, I guess the point is like the ending is when you stop fighting. Right. You can keep fighting, but at a certain point you have to give up. And there is a point at which you cannot, you cannot win the fight.
Shh. We're not there yet, though.
No, but what I'm saying is if you view this as a story that's being told to Senua to educate her, that is in and of itself its own lesson. There are things that there are aspects of this reality that it doesn't matter how hard you fight, you're just not going to be able to beat them, and you have to be okay with that.
Which I think I would say is probably one of the hardest things for humans to.
Oh yeah,
accept.
Definitely, definitely.
We have this drive to defeat our bad or overcome.
Yeah, you don't have control over something. What?
Right. Which is why I do think a lot of this is built for her to try to regain control. She's built this world where she can try to make her way through it and keep fighting forward. And if I can jump to, do exactly what triggers this part. So if either one of you remember from watching or whatever, but there's one of my favorite, other than the challenges, one of my favorite segments of the game is there's this part she ends up in, and I think it's when it's about the same time when you find out about her mom, right? I think. So she's super here, she has her dad's voice in her bunch at this point, and right around the same time that you discover about what actually happened to her mom, she ends up in this area where it's the first 100% directly hell related visual I feel like we get in the game. There's no question of kind of what this is supposed to represent. I feel like, and basically you're trudging at least knee deep, sometimes deeper than that, in what I think is definitely supposed to be blood. And all around the sides, what basically creates the walls of this space are these what look like completely charred bodies of all different, some of them are huge and some of them are smaller, and they're all kind of entwined together, and they look like they're kind of in agony. And you fight your way through against a bunch of enemies throughout this part, and it's probably one of the most frustrating battle sequences of the entire game too. And you're just kind of fighting your way through. You end up seeing like your mom's face at one point and kind of having a conversation with her, which you do throughout the game. There's a couple of different points where you see your mother's face in like rock shapes or on like the roof of a building, and you focus on it, and you kind of have a little back and forth with her, which is basically her telling you that, you know, she's dealt with the same kinds of things, and like her almost giving this positive spin to the experience, like saying like you have something unique about you. You know, I had it too. You're able to see into this other world, basically, that other people will never be able to experience the way we do. And as you're fighting through this, like my very favorite moment, entire like scene, I guess, of the game is there's a point where you end up crawling up one of these giant charred bodies, and it feels so wrong because first of all, like you're in his mind or something, right? Like you're like walking right past his face, and it doesn't. There's no. It's just there. It has no. Not necessarily that it doesn't care that you're there, but it can't. You know, it can't do things. And you end up having to cross what's technically a sort of a bridge, but it's two of them holding hands. And there's something so like disturbing and beautiful at the same time about this moment where like there's these completely, which I guess you could argue are either people who have died and are in hell, or it could also just be that they're supposed to kind of represent people who have not overcome, right? They're people who have been completely consumed by their rot. And that these two are reaching out to each other and hanging on, you know, and that you use that connection to cross and to exit this area, basically. And maybe I'm like reading way
no,
than it's meant.
No, like okay, so talk about this being a super artistic game and up for lots of interpretation. I actually kind of viewed that whole sequence as her coping with the destruction of the town. And that the couple at the end is kind of a hint towards her and Dillian, like what she feels like should have happened type thing.
I like that.
That was just an artistic interpretation of it more than anything.
Yeah. No, I really like that because I kept on wondering, who are these just supposed to be? Generic people? Are they supposed to be something specific? And I really like that take on it. And I think that gives a whole nother level to the whole experience of that scene, chapter, segment, whatever we want to call it in this. And then, I mean, at that point, we're kind of getting close to the end of the game-ish, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I
mean, you got the sword back, or you've got the sword put together, essentially.
Right.
At that point. And the final battles, you're fighting all the same things that you have fought before. All the gods,
like it literally
and
brings back the bosses. It brings back all the same.
Which, by the way, the fighting animations at the end, like it feels so epic.
And can we just, if you don't play the game, which honestly, please go play the game. But if you don't do anything else after this conversation, everybody needs to go listen to, just look up the final fight music. Like the music.
Oh, the music. Yeah.
And
so
watching
good.
the final sequence is all like, it just, you will never feel more epic in your entire life than when you were playing this game. And first of all, the music design is absolutely incredible throughout this game.
All the sound design.
Yes. The whole, like the audio department, huge props to you guys. But this final sequence, the music and the way it's timed, because whoever created it, literally thought through the way that the tempo of the combat throughout the game, how it works, like literally the speed at which you can play. And they timed out the tempo of the music to go so in sync with what you're doing. It is insane. Like it's like somebody's playing it live for you as you do it. And like you get throughout the game when you're in, there's this thing where you can focus again. And basically what it does is it slows down your enemies. It kind of like freezes them somewhat, and you can go attack them, and you can more easily do a number of attacks on them at one time and take them down easier. And if you do combos, you kind of do some cool flips and stuff. So throughout this, you're getting that like back to back constantly. So you just like feel crazy awesome. You're like, screw this. Because at this point, you see Hella.
Mhm.
You've seen Hella. She's back there. You're trying to get to her. You're fighting your way through the masses. You're fighting your way through the things you've already fought before. And you hit a point, which Blue just brought up a little bit ago. You hit a point where there's just swarms. They just keep coming and coming and coming, and you just keep getting more and more hurt. And you're like, what the heck? Like, there is no way. You literally have the voices. It's the one time in the game that you should actually listen to the voices in your head. Because the rest of the game, you don't want to. Because I made that mistake. There were a couple of times where they would be like, oh, you should turn around. Don't go that way. So I literally would like turn around and go the other way. I'm like, what? No. Don't block out what they're saying.
Well, you've been trained the entire game not to listen to them, and then all of a sudden you have to listen to them.
Yes. So this whole time they're saying, and you even have had like your dad's deep, creepy voice saying like, give in, give up. You need to let go, let go, let go. They keep just saying this. And you finally figure out either you accidentally die because you just can't keep fighting, or you finally go, I wonder. And you let yourself get taken out by them. And all of a sudden it cuts into the final cutscene, which is like the cutscene of all cutscenes. I'm gonna let you guys talk about it first because I'm gonna have a moment with this one. So you guys go ahead.
It's okay. I'm gonna talk about right before the cutscene. Actually, yes. I'm gonna talk about the battle sequence because Hella is this giant being in this whole sequence.
And she's so pretty.
She's pretty, but also very creepy at the same time.
Yes.
Like, what was the character from Guardians of the Galaxy? She kind of reminds me of her. The one who is part robot that is Gamora's sister.
Oh, yeah.
She kind of reminds me of her a little bit.
It's the bald thing.
Right. It is the bald thing.
The companion from Doctor Who.
And the face also getting hurt. Which you do to yourself in game, which also I loved.
Yes.
But the fact that you're chasing her across these bridges and fighting these bosses and everything, and she yells at you essentially, like there's this guttural scream type thing that happens towards you before you take on the next boss. Mm-hmm. And as somebody who at this point had realized what the game was really about, not necessarily like it just being another video game, went, oh my God, she's fighting against herself.
Mm-hmm.
She is bucking against this final challenge, fighting tooth and nail and screaming at herself.
Yep.
And visually, Hella is a mirror image, I realized, of her. Because, a
darker one, but yeah.
Right, because her, the side of her that is all like burnt up and kind of missing is the mirror image side of where your rot has been growing the entire game.
Also, her face, the injury on her face, you have on your face as well at that point.
It's so, and as you look at her more, you can see like the eyes are just similar enough too. Like it's so good. It's so good. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
No. Final cutscene though. Honestly, the final cutscene is just impactful. It leaves you with such a feeling, but at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, I don't remember much of it because I'm just so moved by the whole thing. Like, I want to cry. I just remember watching her take the head out, essentially, and let the head fall. And that's where my brain shut off. Because I was like, okay.
Yeah. Blue, did you have any, or should I go?
No, I mean, I kind of already said it. I think that it's a indication of her gaining the strength to stand on her own. And she understands that the things that are holding her back are this obsession with, she's always been told that she has this darkness, that she's rotted on the inside, that she's, she needs Dillion to walk her through these episodes. And like you guys are saying, ultimately she's fighting herself. Like, she's fighting against herself. She's screaming at herself. She's struggling against herself. And when she finally lets that and she accepts that darker aspect as part of herself, that's when she wins. It's the acceptance of, this is me. This is who I am for better or worse, I guess, if you want to go down that road. I think that's what it speaks. But
so for those who haven't watched it or played it, this is like the giant spoiler warning if you guys haven't caught on to that. But to explain what we're discussing here, basically after you let yourself kind of get taken out, you basically go face to face with Hella. You don't actually fight her at all. You basically talk at her. Hella doesn't talk at you at all. She just kind of looks at you.
Yeah, mirrors don't talk. Right.
And she this is the part that I love the most. I was so basically the reason I played the game, what convinced me to play the game is because I actually had the ending kind of, I don't want to say ruined for me, but I had watched the final half hour of the game played by somebody else. One of my favorite streamers.
You?
I know, but it actually made it a cooler experience in some ways because I got to play through the game knowing that. So I got to, the second time you watch a movie, notice all the clues. I got to see all the clues as I went rather than being like, oh yeah, I have to think back on it. But anyway, I realized when I watched it the first time, basically you take out Dillian's head and you're just on the floor looking up at Hella, and through this entire thing, you bargain with her, you fight with her, you get angry, you get sad, you basically give up, and there's a point where you hit acceptance. You literally go through the seven stages of grief.
It's like you're going through stages or something.
You have a monologue at Hella, and you're going through the stages as you do this monologue at her. And it is so incredible the way that they do it in a matter of a 2-minute segment. You go through grief, and they represent it so well. And then basically the final thing is you, Hella stabs you through the middle. And Hella picks up Dylan's head and walks over to the edge of this area and drops his head down. And then all of a sudden it cuts back away from seeing the head falling to Senua is the one kneeling there and has let the head go over the edge. And that's when you have it finally confirmed to you they are one and the same person. And then the part that I think is probably going to be the most debatable for at least between my opinion of it and your guys's, and where I would want to tie in, there's this secret cutscene that you get if you find all of the little runes or whatever. You get a little special cutscene with Druth shortly before this final sequence of the game. But basically, right at the end, the narrator voice kind of cuts in and starts talking about how, well, that's kind of all I know at this point. This is where my knowledge reaches, and you realize that the voices have stopped talking throughout this whole thing. They're gone during this sequence, and then they slowly start to chitter in your head again, just a tiny bit, and Senua turns and literally spikes the camera, which she does multiple times throughout the game. She spikes it and has this kind of sad look that turns into a almost half creepy grin is the way I interpret it. It may have just been the way you guys were saying is just acceptance. I read it as possibly moving into a different route instead of trying to go save Dillian, which is obviously not going to happen. My theory is basically, well, before I get ahead of myself, sorry. Basically, the narrator is saying, this is kind of where it ends, but you go with her. There's more to her story. And then Senua even invites you to come with her and says, come see what's next, basically. So they basically set it up for a sequel, first of all. But they also were saying, just hitting this point is not the final point of her experience. It's not just a fix-all. It's not done. There's more to overcome, and there's more to come in her story of her life. Whether that's going to be positive things or negative, we'll have to wait and see. However, my theory is that she has definitely come to a point of empowerment about herself. She has definitely learned a lot of things. She has accepted that she cannot bring Dillian back. But my theory is that the next stage that she's going into is revenge.
Against Druth.
Either against Druth or Because to explain the cutscene you get basically is Drew. Well, do you want to explain the cutscene? Because
so Druth basically explains that he didn't exactly escape, is my understanding, the way that he said he did. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
It kind of reads more like he kind of...
He traded his life for...
something.
Freedom.
For something. And that either... So there's either the theory that he's the one that basically traded himself, his freedom to have the Northmen go after her village / specifically Dillion or whatever, or he says in the little sequence, he says something along the lines of that somebody all in black came and let the Northmen know. Well, the only character we've ever seen in black throughout the game specifically is her dad.
Daddy Dearest.
So my theory is that Dad came to the Northmen and said, hey, you should come do this, or here's this person, whatever, basically sicked the Northmen on Dillion as a way to try to teach his daughter a lesson of look what your darkness did to somebody you care about.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because that whole scene with Dad is just ugh.
Because basically there's a point where he says, I want to go on my little adventure. Says, oh heck no you don't, and basically tells her that she's all sorts of messed up, there's no help, and that she needs to stay here, blah blah blah. And basically the scenario ends with he ends up trying to grab her. I believe there's a point where he does hit her, correct?
He does knock her down.
She basically takes off and is like, screw you, I'm doing this is what I need to do. And that's the last thing you like distinctly know of, like timeline wise, of the interaction between her and her dad. So they didn't leave it in a good place. And if it's true that her dad is possibly the one who told the Northmen about Dillion, my opinion is that she's going to go seek revenge on her dad / the Northmen. And that's what that little smirk at the end is her going, okay, I can't bring him back, but I'm empowered. I know I can make it through this. If I can do this, I can at least seek revenge for my loved one. That's the way I kind of took it. It's kind of going to the next level of.
It'd be interesting if they try to do a sequel like that.
Yeah,
I
half hope they do, and I half am like.
I think it would cheapen
maybe it. Could just leave it where it is. I don't know. Yeah. Like.
I think if they did a sequel of that storyline, I think it would cheapen the message.
The fact that you can continue to live with mental illness and still be able to cope.
No, like the fact that it's like, no, the only reason I don't know. I took the ending as merely a sign, not that it was that like they're setting it up for a sequel, though. I definitely could see that case. I definitely see what you're saying there, but I was reading it more of like, this is just one trial. Like you still have a life to live. Like this is not the only thing. And like you were saying, like, you know, you walk through the stages of grief, and the final one is letting go. And part of letting go is letting go. Like, you know, and accepting that they're gone and not doing all that.
But Dillion wasn't the initial trigger.
No. And I was just about to say, also given the historical context that, you know, this is taking in place, and revenge is not out of the question. Like, I mean, it's entirely possible that is the process of, you know, like, you know, she has now risen to the challenge of being able to take on the next acceptable, in the historical context of her world, the next acceptable process, or the next acceptable step in this process, which is, you have killed my family. And, you know, it's the whole eye for an eye world.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you've got, not to make it stereotypical, but think about the number of storylines. Like, you know, realistically, there's so many stories that can be told. There's different ways to tell them, but we do tend to retell stories. And a very common one when it comes to, you know, the revenge kind of story, especially when there's Daddy Dearest involved, is when Dad's the bad guy, you usually take out dad, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like that. You go that route. I mean, we can even go, Star Wars. Anyone like
Mhm.
it's been done before, and if it is dad, just for her character, as much as we may not agree with the idea,
Oh yeah.
it fits her character a whole lot to take out because in a sense we don't. I'm sure that dealing with psychosis is something that was, especially with her mom dealing with it as well. It was something that was passed on to her in some ways, but also that it was brewed in part because of her father and the way that he treated her. And we don't know if that's what may have spawned it for both of them. Honestly, it may have been
an abusive relationship that is with a self-fulfilling prophecy or self-fulfilling issue.
Right. So,
you're assuming that her father doesn't have a form of psychosis.
That's
assuming, it's possible.
I think it's. Yeah. I would argue that he does, but that is neither here nor there.
I definitely would agree that he has something. I don't know if I would necessarily say at least the same.
Oh yeah.
Fair. But that he definitely deals with his own darkness. And I think that's kind of the point, is that everybody in this, every character you meet does.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because even Dillion has his own darkness.
Well, right. He even sits there and says, he kind of addresses that she kind of makes him out to be this like perfect thing, and that nobody is, and he deals with his own stuff. And he has his own struggles, and it's. I think there's many ways that it could go, and I think we'll a lot more a sequel, and one of the things that I want to also give the devs credit for, before I forget, which was another one that was very personal for me, was the fact that Senua gives too much credit to Dillion compared to herself, yes. However, they did a really, really great job of giving credit to the people who live with people who live with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
My Dillion is my husband in so many weird ways, like just personality wise. It was uncanny. Literally the way he helps her through some of the challenges, by empowering her, making her realize she can do it, is exactly what Joey does for me when I deal with these attacks and stuff. And, I think sometimes that we forget about the effect that not blaming people who deal with mental illness, but the effect that mental illness has on the people who care about the person dealing with it as well. And it's important to cherish what they're able to do, but also to make sure that they have support along with the person dealing with the mental illness.
Right.
It does, the concept of it spreading internally, it also can spread externally. Not saying that you have depression, therefore anybody that you is now going to be depressed, but the fact that what you deal with and the way you deal with it does have an effect, both good and bad, on the people in your life. And that goes for everything, not just mental illness, but literally everything that you do, everything that you are, affects the world around you and the people around you, in good and bad ways. And it's important to acknowledge that. And I think that the game did a really good job of that as well, when it comes to Dillion and showing that she romanticizes his help too much, and that's something she also has to overcome throughout it, is realizing strength outside of him. And I think
not there anymore.
Right. And Blue, I think that's the part that you seem to have really I think that's the part that really stuck out to you at the ending, is that
right. Letting
go of needing him and being able to be her own person. That doesn't necessarily mean be her own person outside of psychosis.
I would also argue, though, that she also realizes that even though his body isn't there, she's had him with her the whole time, and that she carries him with her.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not just the physical head anymore.
His head anymore, but she carries him in. It's going to sound crazy, but in her heart and in her mind.
Mm-hmm.
And his effect on her life will always be there, even if he's not.
And like what you were saying about her effect on, or mental illness effect on the individuals who care for him. The thing is like everyone has an effect on everyone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's the big point there too, is that everything you do has ramifications, whether that's good or bad. And with Dillion, the ramification was that in order for her to let him go, I think I really agree with what you were just saying, is like the over romanticizing of what he does for her, and then the realization that that's what she does, and then the letting go of that romanticization. Again, I'm also even begging the question, is Dillion actually even gone? Like, is this actually, there's a possibility, because once you step out of reality in a video game, or in general, it starts begging the question of, well, where did it actually deviate from reality? Like,
right.
And so this could be more about her learning that Dillion is not that Dillion is not necessary, but that he is not the end all be all to her happiness.
Well, I mean, if you want to take a possible in-game example of what that may have happened, if she's off doing her little sabbatical, and that's the point where this episode happens, the fear of him being taken, or the fear of him going off to work, because wasn't he training to do
yes
battle throughout it?
Because that's how she learned how to use the sword.
Right. And so the concept that maybe this is just the idea of, hey, he could have these people and come attack him at any point because he's a warrior. He wants to protect people, but he's always in danger.
Right. Or the fact, like what you were just saying, say she's on the sabbatical and she has an episode. Well, Dillion's always been the one that's been there talking her through the episode. Dillion's not there. So this is her process of working her way through an episode.
And
there's so many different possibilities. Yeah.
She goes and meets him again.
Yeah. Then she has another episode.
But I mean, the thing that would be really neat is if they continue to use, and this is just video games in general. I love video games like this that talk on a very meta perspective of things that people really go through, whether it's a mental illness issue or family issues, or even just the psychology of living in a certain time period or anything like that, or just the philosophy. A game that comes to mind was, it was just a puzzle game, but it was so meta because the game was talking at you as you were doing the puzzles.
Oh, that game.
Wait. Oh my gosh.
Luma, something.
Yes, I hated that game.
Numa.
It was so good though.
I didn't finish it. Yes.
I did finish it, but I love the games that step out and are teaching you a lesson while you're actually playing them.
Right.
Whether it's a philosophical or a lesson about yourself, because that's ultimately what I took out of this one. Well, yeah, some of the games that are doing like patience is a very common theme, but games like this where it's just like you're not only learning about this in general, but you're learning about yourself through it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's any good storytelling, I would argue.
But I think this is like a game like this takes it to. So, for example, I always say that every single person has a mental status, right? We always talk about mental health, like some people have it, some people don't. That's complete bull. Okay, like everybody has it. Just some people are in a good state, and some people are in a bad state. Some people are consistently in a good state, and some people are consistently in a bad, and some people flip-flop, and everybody has bad days and good days. It's all mental health, right? There's diagnoses within mental health, which are what we talk about most commonly as being the definition of mental health, right? Like we're like, oh, if you're not diagnosed with depression or, bipolar or this or that, you don't have mental health. Well, that's not what the term mental health means. Like it's like you wouldn't say that, oh, somebody who is not obese and somebody who is not highly fit doesn't have physical health. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not only extremes. Everybody fits in the spectrum of mental health. And that this game, I think, makes you realize that. Like, if you're not somebody who walks around every day processing that concept, I think that this makes you go, okay, I understand this little bit. And I wouldn't quite understand it to the level I do if I didn't experience something, even if it's on this, like, they pick psychosis. They pick the particular scenario that Senua is in to be this extreme end of a spectrum, right?
Right.
And that, it makes you realize that you may deal, even if it's just that day, something happened that made you feel a certain way that you then acknowledged while you were playing the game. That's something that's it's not the stereotypical life lesson game. It's beyond that. It's like your interpretation of the lesson it's giving you, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
it's going to be very unique.
Well, it's kind of like what Blue was saying at the very beginning, that this game is a good teaching tool to help teach to cope with anything, quite frankly. You don't have to have any sort of ailments, quite frankly. Right. You can be going through depression. You could be just having a bad day just because somebody said something wrong, or people on Twitter are saying stuff that you just can't handle anymore because, anyway, real life. But it helps you.
No, that never happens.
Oh gosh, you saw my.
You're reading YouTube comments.
But it gives you a chance to work through it, and it gives you a format that is an entertainment format, but it still helps you actually work through the issues yourself.
Right. One quick thing I did want to mention, because we kind of, when we were talking about the ending sequence, forgot to say it, that you finally, right at the end too, like literally after she's from the camera and everything, there's this final moment where it shows you where you are at the end, like where you've interacted with Hella, which is supposed to be like the end all point, right? Like you're deep in hell at this point, right? Or so you think. And when it pulls back, it shows you that you're at the top of this wooden structure thing. I have no idea what it's supposed to be, but you've seen it throughout the entire game in the distance. It's just been there. And you process that basically you've made it from like over on this side of the beach to up on that thing, which was also on the beach. That's been your entire journey. Like realistically within this space, all of this happened within a space that probably normally would have taken you like an hour to probably walk and climb or whatever, like it's this reality snap of showing you what you've actually technically been doing and the way she experienced that small space and that small time. And I think that's really, really cool. The way that they to show you that, because you get so lost at a point in the game, you no matter how aware you,
I mean,
that it was just a game or that it was not reality for her or for us, I guess
you just lose concept of reality.
And so all of a sudden at the end you're like, oh my goodness, that's right. Like actually happened at all. And throughout it, I love, like you said, Green, I think right at the beginning you said when you were trying to decide how to label what Senua is to the game, like is she the character you play as or the character you play through? And those moments where she spikes the camera and says things to you, or like she'll occasionally just give you a look when the voices are talking. She'll look straight at you and give you some kind of like response, sort of. There's even some points where she looks at you like she wants to kill you, like as if she's blaming you for whatever just happened, or like that you just did something bad to her. You start to piece together, I think you're right when you say you're playing through her, not necessarily as her. That you're supposed to either be a tag along of one of her voices. You're supposed to be another person experiencing the same type of thing, and you're just seeing her version of what you might be dealing with. The fact that she invites you at the end to like come with her, is I mean, they completely break the fourth wall a number of times in this to acknowledge that you're not her, but she's letting you see what's going on.
It's the meta that you're actually the one dealing with all of this.
Right. Like, are we using this? Like, is it supposed to be that we kind of created this Senua character as the same way she created her reality to deal with things, right? Like, is the entire game and this character supposed to be our creation, right? Mm-hmm. The player's creation to deal with our stuff. And I love that. Like, again, like it takes you that like final layer deep where you're like, oh man.
It's good. It's such a good game. I highly recommend it. Even if you don't have a PlayStation, at least go and watch it, because you can get a lot of, I mean, there's some in-depth stuff that I have not seen because I have not played it, but you can get a lot of the bulk of what we've talked about here.
Yes.
Through some of those cutscenes and just some gameplay. Just watch somebody's gameplay. It's really good.
I would offer mine, but I can't because Twitch ate it and never gave it back to me.
I'm really upset. Mean old Twitch.
Like, it literally was one of those, like, I went back like 2 days later to highlight, it was just gone. And I'm like, what? But no! Of all things to disappear, why this one?
Gosh.
But there's lots of people out there that have played it, and but like you're saying, if you in any way can get your hands on the game, do it. And it's not that long. Like, I sat down, I split it into 2 different streams more for like just being able to handle it. Because like it is one of those, if you deal with some stuff, you are going to. I would recommend having like another person that you can reach out to like just kind of.
They say that at the beginning too.
Right.
Yes, they give some really good warnings. At the beginning of it, and just to have somebody you can process with or somebody right there. Do go in a bit wary. It's the way that I said it. I think I even said this on my stream afterwards, and I said it to Joey. It was one of the most triggering games I've ever played, and one of the most therapeutic games I've ever played at the exact same time. Like, it's just, there's no other way for me to put that, I guess. Like, it's definitely worth it. But it can be very difficult at times.
Mm-hmm.
And watch the Vidoc. Green, I expect you to like go watch it.
I will put that on my queue at work. I guess, should I watch it or can I listen to it?
You can probably mostly listen to it. There's a few things that are definitely worth seeing, watching. But to start off with, like, audio would be fine for the most part.
Cool.
The only part that's really, really cool to see is like seeing them do the recording for the voice, like the whispering voices and stuff, is kind of cool to visually see how they did it. And then seeing the main actress do her thing, which, I mean, if you look her up at all, you'll probably just see the same exact clips as well. But, yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, I feel like I derailed the lore concept of this a lot. I apologize.
With a lot of these extra lores, a lot of these games have so much lore that a 2-hour section is not going to cover everything. What I like, and I'm sure, Blue, you have kind of feelings towards this too, when it comes to a game that we're explaining the general concept of the game is a really important thing to show people what it is. And the general concept of this game is the whole story of Senua working through what she worked through. And that's, I think, the biggest part of this game. Yes, there's lore on Norse mythology. And if anybody wants the Lore Stone transcriptions, just message me. I have all of them, all 44 of them.
I'm so sorry, that's right. You went through all of that.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I wanted to know more about it. And it actually got me to pick up my book from Neil Gaiman that he just released, that Norse mythology book that I bought like 3 months ago that I haven't cracked.
Shame.
Hey, I read through it now. I'm caught up. But
sorry.
Go for it.
I would say I do really want. I hope really, really hope that this is a really big stepping stone for the gaming world. Just, there are a number of smaller indie games out there that have tackled issues. There's a number of games that have tackled mental health. There's some that have tackled loss. One that I really want to play it. I've seen a lot about it, but there's one called That Dragon Cancer. It's a indie game that I think was made mostly just by one guy, who's a father who's very, very small child was diagnosed with cancer.
Nope. Not going to play that one. I can't handle that.
I don't. That's part of why I've put it off. But it is supposed to be extremely well done and very, very raw.
Yeah, I can.
So there are a lot of games that it's really good to see one to get. I wouldn't call Ninja Theory like mainstream AAA. They've been involved in things that have been, but I don't know if I would call like the company themselves a AAA company per se. But seeing a game like this that normally would get kind of not that the indie world is a bad place to be, but get kind of stuck in that that realm and not recognize the same level. I think it's really good to see a game that tackled this kind of thing in this kind of artistic way get the kind of spotlight that it has. And it's up for a number of nominations for awards. And personally, I would say it deserves them. But I really, really do hope that this reaches out to developers, because I think as gamers, we obviously we seek out games often as an escape from reality, an escape from the crap that we're dealing with daily. But that it's also really important to acknowledge that this thing that a lot of us see as a hobby, as a pastime, as an escape, is also an extremely important platform that has so many possibilities to address issues that in ways that nothing else can. I mean, I personally believe that a game can tackle an issue such as mental health way better than a movie ever could wish to, unless we're talking like at some point we go like full on VR choice-based movies or something, which then basically playing a video game, right? I really hope that this opens eyes of a lot of developers and as gamers. If there's a topic that you want to see talked about in a game, let a dev know or become a dev, because games like this would have inspired me to go, hey, something I want to do. I want to make a game that makes somebody feel the crazy soup of emotions I felt playing this. But anyway, sorry, that was my spiel from gaming world standpoint. Just developers, if you're listening, you can do it. You can make fun games that are escapes, and you can also make games like this, and they both matter and are important.
They do. Lou, do you want to wrap up?
Yep. I'm just going to say our next topic is going to be one of Beard's favorite topics ever. It's going to be over Dead Space. So if you guys want to jump into that one, yeah, I know.
Wait, Beard just unmuted for the first time.
Belle Belle's gonna definitely want to be a part of that chat, because I know she loves the jump scare games.
Nope.
She's a huge proponent of them. Don't let
Dead
it fool you.
Space is the number one game that everybody in my life I cannot handle.
What? It's totally full of unicorns and happiness. I don't know why they say you can't handle it.
Maybe killer unicorns that like poop acid on your face.
Is it?
That's possible.
Because it also deals with mental illness along with blood and
yeah,
gore?
yeah. There's that too.
How about this? I'll listen to your show on it, and have your goal be to convince me to play this game.
So let's put it this way. Next time on Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice Part 2, Dead Space, Isaac's Resolve, we're going to lose our damn minds. All right? That's about what's going to happen.
I'm convinced. I'm in.
I'm scared.
I'm scared.
You should be. You should be.
The mention of... I don't even know what Infested Potato mentioned in chat. I just went, I'm gonna be back in a month, guys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It's
the
just
necros.
scary.
Yeah, you'll have your time where you're basically on mute for most of it. And I'll be like, all right, that's
I'm
fine.
okay with this.
You'll be scrolling through YouTube comments while Beard talks.
I will be crying in a corner while Beard talks, is what I'll be doing.
Saying,
You're going to be like, I'm going to go play Hellblade, because compared to this.
It's fluffy and painted
It's
rainbows.
fluffy and painted with rainbows. Oh, man. But yeah, so Dead Space is going to be our next topic. Again, thank you, Belle, for jumping on. And Beard, do you have any shout outs?
not tonight, to be honest.
Okay. And then let's run through outro real quick, and then we'll stick around for a little bit. I know we'll probably want to chat with chat to see if they have any questions. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/focusedfirechat. Links to all our other sites can also be found with our episode archives over on focusedfirechat.com. Thank you again, Belle, for jumping into the chat. Really appreciate having you, and I'll be sure to get your contact information links posted in our show notes for anyone who wants to continue chatting with you. Please be sure to email us at focusedfirechat@gmail.com with any comments or questions for our teams concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedbacks and a rating over on iTunes as well. Reminder, we do try to stream a recap of the month-long Extra Lore conversation on the first Wednesday of each month, but if we do have any variations, we always make sure to let everyone know through our Twitter account at FocusFireChat. Also, be sure to check out all of our amazing partner podcasts within the Guardian Radio Network over on theguardiansofdestiny.com. So, until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.